Welcome to Tarducks, a podcast for content creators to come on and share their stories, experiences, and advice. And I'm pretty excited. I got something different today. I got the developers from We the People on. Welcome, guys.
Hey, pleased to meet you.
Yes, same to you. So I have to say, I loved the trailer, and I can't wait to hear your story and everything else that's going to go along that way. You guys got some traction going. I see. I saw a great video from Blue Drake, from Moy Dog. You guys were in a PC gaming website, so you guys got to be pretty excited right now.
Oh man, excited, nervous, understanding the weight of it all right about now,
Yeah.
and hoping to live up to seemingly some pretty big expectations.
Yeah. So now, before we jump into everything there, let's, what is sort of, why don't we go through and just you guys each introduce yourself and sort of, how, what you guys do with We the People.
Sure. I'm Drew. I'm obviously the CEO of Small Indie Company. I'd like to think of myself as sort of a creative director, but for both of our games that we're developing. However, I also do like a little bit of level design, environmental art, and some game development. Sort of wearing many hats, if you will. But I leave most of the development up to these guys.
Ian?
Yes, my name's Ian Goldsmith. I'm currently working on the movement component, getting our character movement and all that up to snuff.
Cool. And Cody?
Hey, my name's Cody, and primarily my main focus right now is working on a fully fledged, just big old spatial inventory framework for us to really kind of build on.
Nice. And now, what is everybody's background that's here with us right here?
So I guess to start off, I come from a sort of IT and cybersecurity background. Obviously, I spent time in the Army, and when I got out, I sort of talk about this in the devlog, but when I got out of the Army, I kind of had this natural void. I feel like that was just sort of missing, and I've always been an avid gamer, and obviously picked up game development, and here we are.
Cool. And Ian?
That would be next. So I went to the University of Advancing Technologies here in Arizona back in 2013 for game design and game programming. Since then, I've led and been a part of lots of small projects that unfortunately never really went anywhere until Drew reached out to me and I joined this project.
Cool. Cody?
Currently working on my bachelor's for computer science, which has been kind of a waste of time because I haven't learned anything yet. But yeah, mostly just programming, and I've got really involved with game development.
And now, from a gaming standpoint, sort of what is your guys all sort of like, gaming background? Are you guys all fans of like the survival games, the first person shooters, or are there some of you guys out there like, hey, we love Sims?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a variety gamer, if you will. I'm a big fan of competitive FPS, tactical, hardcore tactical shooters. Definitely extraction shooters as well. Big fan of EFT, Hunt Showdown, things like that. Of course, I liked the Cycle before that closed down. Rest in peace. I've been a big fan of competitive shooting, just like Counter-Strike and obviously a little bit of COD game battles back in the day, stuff like that. I'm big fan of RPGs, MMOs, things like that. And so trying to, I guess, bring in RPG elements into what we're doing is second nature.
Loyal. Ian?
I am more on the Mountain Blade fantasy style turn-based or Crusader Kings 3.
Yeah.
I haven't actually touched a first-person shooter game in a while, but I recently did get into Tarkov.
Ah, okay.
He's been converted.
And you survived.
Especially now that he's working on one.
Yeah.
Nice. And Cody, what's some of your favorite games?
Pretty much a mirror of Drew with the addition of a lot of horror stuff. So I like
Okay.
additionals like Outlast, for example, which recently released Outlast Trials, so that's been pretty fun.
Nice.
But tactical shooters, Ground Branch is kind of a staple for me and what I like.
Yeah, nice. All right, so let's talk about the small indie company, Drew. What made you decide to start it?
Well, obviously the concept of small indie company, the origin of the name is a meme, right? It sort of comes from a sort of play on Activision and Blizzard and obviously Riot Games, stuff like that. It's this concept that, you might have a very large, fairly bloated conglomerate, a AAA company coming out with a multi-million or billion-dollar game, and in some cases it's still not polished, it's still not finished, it's there are some somewhat glaring issues, and the sort of joke online is, give Activision a break, they're a small indie company. And so we kind of wanted to lean on that a little bit, and we thought it was kind of funny, and we also want to show that we don't take ourselves too seriously. We take what we do very seriously, but we're never going to be the company out there that is trying to preach to people. We're not activists, nothing like that. You'll never find that there's politics involved in any of the games we're making, anything like that. We're just trying to make good games at a reasonable price. We're not a crypto, NFT, Web3, nothing like that. We want to make games. We are gamers, and so we're making games, by the people, for the people, as hokey as it sounds. That's truly what we're doing. And we got a lot of room to grow, of course, but a small indie company is small, and thankfully it's starting to be not so small. It's starting to grow with a lot of volunteers, especially since we've been public facing. There's been just a tremendous amount of people reaching out and wanting to get involved, and we're very thankful for that. We're also humbled by an opportunity like that. And so that is the origin of Small Indie Company. It's how can we basically bring back gaming into the industry these days, and it really started with sort of my solo projects, and once again, I found myself needing to surround myself with skilled professionals, people that know far more than I do, and are far more proficient than I am. But I have these ideas, I have these concepts, and I'd really like to bring them to light without necessarily jeopardizing the integrity of these ideas. And so that's what we're doing, and that's sort of the ethos behind Small Indie Company.
Okay. And now, pardon my ignorance, I don't know the whole, from a developing a game standpoint, but so you're developing the game. Where does a publisher fit into that mix, or is a publisher even needed today? Because you don't need to press thousands of CDs or anything like that. It's really throw it up on a line in the cloud, and where does a publisher fit in these days?
Man, it's a hot button issue, and it's a good question for sure. So since we've been public facing, we've had a tremendous amount of publishers reach out to us, people that make some of our favorite games. Cody named a game earlier. We don't have to touch on it too specifically, but we've been in communications with quite a few, and I think it is not necessary these days to have a publishing arm, and so. I think as a small development team, it would make the most sense to side with a publisher. In fact, I think in almost any circumstance, most small development teams are trying to find a publishing arm to represent them or to work side by side with them to get the game out and get in front of as many people as possible. In our circumstance, though, we've been very fortunate to get a lot of traction and eyes on what we're doing. I mean, Steam Next Fest alone brought 2 million eyes on what we're doing, and we're very thankful for those types of opportunities, and that's why we're not necessarily in any rush to partner with a publisher. I think traditionally what a publisher would provide to a small team like ours is the type of comfort and stability, to keep the lights on, of course, but also to allow us to do this type of thing full time. And someone like Ian, for example, he works with Halo, for example, for his main gig. And so a publisher, if somehow we secured something like that, it would definitely provide us the luxury of bringing on a great dev like Ian to work full time for Small Indie Company. But is it necessary? No. And we're starting to see that, we've since we've been public facing, we've had a lot of love and support from fans and stuff like that. And we're very thankful for that as well. And so we're starting to notice that it's not a necessity. It's a nice to have.
Yeah. Now, would the publisher put an influx of capital into the company to get more talent on, or that's on your own to sort of, raise your funding that way to bring on full-time people, or just, find the talent on your own?
Yeah, I think it would depend on what the publisher, their intentions are. Are they trying to grow the company in like a business sense? Are they trying to, grow the game into what it could be or should be, arguably. And so in that sense, yeah, I would say they would definitely inject capital into the game, into the project, into the company in some cases, in exchange for equity into the game or the company.
Right.
And obviously the requisite decision making from there. You now have a member of the publishing team who's sort of helping guide a small
Right.
development team like ours. And so I think what's really important from us, if I was to speak from candidly from our perspective, is that we don't necessarily relinquish the creative. We know what we want to make.
Yeah.
We have a good idea clearly, and it's just a matter of having the time to grow into those big boots.
Yeah.
We have boots to fill and quite a lot of expectations upon us, and so
Yeah.
rising to that challenge is important, and not letting a publisher sort of dictate or change. Right? Obviously, we're making an extraction shooter. Say a publisher thinks
Mhm.
we might be more profitable if we make a BR. You might be more profitable if we do a store or a cash shop or
Right.
Web3, crypto, things like that. We've had everything offered to us, anything under the sun, rather. And so, in most cases, it's not very appealing because it oftentimes comes with a sacrifice to the
Yes.
creative. And so, that's what we're learning, and we're sort of learning how to navigate around that type of environment.
Yeah. It's sort of it's your baby, sort of like if we talk Tarkov, it's Nikita's baby. And you don't
100%.
have a person over your shoulder saying, "Hey, like you just said, you change the direction, add this into your game,
Right.
add this. This is your vision or your team's vision to, see this to the end."
Yeah, and to Nikita's credit, I think he's done an amazing job at balancing his baby with the success he's found. A lot of people see that Tarkov isn't what it's ever intended to be. It's just what was necessary to get it to this point.
Yeah.
And I think as it shifts, as it changes, it will become sort of his vision long term.
Yeah.
And in some cases, that's super cool to see. We're huge fans of BSG, and we love and support what they do.
Yeah. Well, they made that game that gave us that itch that we can't seem to scratch, and sort of leads me into the next question. What made you, create this, why create your own game?
Right. I think tackling your inner creativity is super important to any game devs out there, aspiring or otherwise. You guys have to do that. You have to challenge yourselves, and in some cases go against the grain, right? Like Tarkov is such a niche community, but it is a very vibrant community. It's a very dedicated community, and to try to make a competitor to that it's silly, it's crazy, but we're trying. And I think in some cases we don't want to make the next Tarkov. We want to make We the People. And we have nothing but respect once again for Escape from Tarkov. We recognize in some cases we're standing on the shoulders of giants, from a lot more than just EFT, right? There's so many games out there over the last 10 years that have motivated everybody. And we're trying our hand at that, and we're trying to improve and iterate upon that blueprint.
Well, that's the nice thing about having your vision. You can take the best pieces of different games, like The Division,
Right.
take DayZ, combine that in, and like, hey, we don't live in menus. We're gonna have this sort of like a, like Division. You just walk in, you have your safe area, and you do all your things there. That's but bring it into a hardcore first-person shooter. That's really cool.
No main menu simulators, right? And like you're saying, it's this sense of foresight going into the development process. We know what we love from a variety of games, a variety of genres, and in some cases we are blending genres. But I think it'll pay off in the end, and really all we need is time.
Yeah.
And thankfully, once again, because we're not a large AAA conglomerate, we don't have a publisher, putting a gun to our head, so to speak. We get the freedom to just grow and scale as needed.
And to touch on that point, so being there's no gun to the head, there's no clock ticking. With being sort of how big is the company?
Right. I'd say we're pretty small, maybe like 15 people. And to be fair, I guess looking at it with context is super important, right? A small indie company is that it's a small team of people, but really we're comprised of a ton of volunteers and some contract hires, of course. And folks like say Ian and Cody, they're dedicating their time, and they're, you know, basically putting in the time now because they believe in this concept. They believe in the idea, and they kind of want to leave their marks on the industry. And obviously you guys can, you know, talk about that as you please. But from my perspective, you know, we are a small team, and no one's really, you know, it's if money was the motivator, then there would be no one here, right? We're here because we want to make a game we would like to play.
Yeah. Yeah, my conversation when Blue Drake was on, we talked about his project he has, Operation Harsh Doorstop.
Super
And
cool.
I was blown away by what he, some of the things he was talking about, like finding talent, and, he'd find somebody and they'd create a fake repository just because you can't trust people, and people would go in there and mess things up. And the other aspect that really was mind boggling was the fact that he was talking about, you have to really protect yourself, because if you get somebody who comes in, writes a piece of code, they could come back a couple of years later and say, that's mine, that's not yours. And so there's things that I had no idea you had to worry about when you're creating your own game.
Oh, absolutely. In many cases, we've tried to employ as much industry standard practice as we can, and we're very thankful once again to be working with people like Ian, who are very ingrained in the industry, right, and have worked on very large projects. And obviously, folks like Cody, he's worked on some cool projects, but I wouldn't say anything like commercially successful, right, Cody?
Right.
Right. And so in some cases, we are aspiring to make something great, but at the same time, you don't necessarily see us at the doorstep of any large studio, begging for attention or begging for a gig. Instead, we just wanted to come together and make something on our own and, try our hand at it. And I think that's super important. And once again, like you kind of mentioned, right, you have to be careful. You have to be very mindful of a lot of these things and the risks involved in all of it. And, I tell people, who say like, I'm not sure that I'm sold on We the People. I don't know if I want to support it or not. And I just tell them, like, hey, wait till the game comes out. Then you guys can try it and play it. And obviously we'll be posting a ton of free demos and multiplayer play tests and stuff like that. Mostly for our supporters, but that's just a funding thing. But beyond that, we'll have an open play test before launches, a closed play test, things like that. And, at least in terms of the security sense, we're utilizing industry standard practice, stuff like Perforce, right, for that collaborative space and trying to work on things together. And it really is a project that all of us are working on together. We're all kind of leaving our mark on We the People. And I think by the time it comes together, it's going to be pretty cool.
Well, I think that's a key comment, right, when it comes together, because, you guys had the event with Steam, which, basically thrust you in front of the limelight. And now you've got people saying, oh, well, I've heard some people talk about, the video, the gameplay, the mechanics. It's like, people, this game is just a proof of concept right now. This is not end game stuff. So wait for a year and a half before you make that judgment.
Yeah, and I think you said you used the right term, thrusted, right? We put our game out there. We just thought taking the most transparent approach possible would mean the most, at least to the people who are interested in following along with that development. We all loved projects like, say, The Day Before. It was one of the most wishlisted games on Steam. It's arguably incredibly enticing to see something like that, and it captures all of our interest. But when you're only seeing very scripted gameplay and things like that, it kind of it rightfully so leaves people with a bit of pause. And so in our case, we thought, well, why don't we just show people the good, the bad, and the ugly, and let them see that every step of the way. And I think that's kind of what makes us different, is we'll bear all for you to see, right? The players, the supporters, the community in general. You guys get to see where we're improving with each iteration. And so, the UI, for example, that was a tumultuous subject during Steam Next Fest. Some people didn't mind it, others absolutely despised it. And so we've been working on new UI concepts. And people, when they get to try the next demo, they'll see that and they'll go, wow, they're making iterative progress, and I support it.
Yeah, and that's like I like the concept you have is like letting everybody see it, taking that feedback, and then
Right.
taking cherry picking the best ideas, the best suggestions, and showing your improvement because like you said with the day before nobody got to touch, nobody got to use a controller,
Right.
mouse, and keyboard and move anything. Here you guys are throwing it out there, and hey, people, give this a try, and they're experiencing it. I think that was really great.
Yeah, and in some cases, you get that feedback even when you don't want it, right? You
Yeah,
get that very positive feedback over almost unnecessarily and overwhelmingly positive feedback, supportive feedback, all stuff we really appreciate. But then you get the haters too, and
yeah,
I think all of it needs to be taken with balance, right? And
yeah,
and so at the end of the day, the people who kind of understand that we're making an iterative process, we're making a proof of concept. At least when it came to Steam Next Fest, and now we're actually developing the game, and I'm very thankful for people like Cody. He mentioned our spatial inventory system. We're already employing fundamental practices that will improve upon some of our
yeah.
biggest competitors, right? And we look at things like hackers and things that basically plague those games. And because we're doing this iterative process and showing people, we get to basically learn but also teach at the same time, and that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. So now let's go back. How did we all? How did you guys get here today? How did you guys? How did you come together first of all, and then what? That first step of showing the game at for the Steam Next Fest. So
Right.
yeah, where did you guys all? How did you guys all meet first of all?
Sure. So to lay the groundwork, I started as a solo dev, kind of teaching myself Unreal over the course of a year or so, maybe a little over a year. And I realized, I was only gonna get so far just based off of my skill and merit alone, right?
Yeah.
So in some cases, I started to branch out and try to find more like-minded folks, people that were really interested in my concepts, my ideas. And I found a gentleman, one of our writers named James. He's astoundingly good and worked with Wizards of the Coast for D&D and stuff like that. And so we really started on Fear and Fealty, which is sort of our first project, one
Mhm.
that is very much still in development. And eventually I basically wanted to bring back kind of the original project I was working on, which was an FPS project. At the time, it was like a third person, first person project, very open world, very large. I think the map itself was like 3.5 times Red Dead Redemption
Oh
2. So it was
wow.
supposed to be very ambitious, and for a solo dev, um, pretty dumb, right? I should not be embarking on a journey like that on my own. And so as such, when we try to expand upon what we're trying to create, we need to expand upon our team. And so I reach out to folks through reputable websites
Yeah.
looking for industry professionals, and sure enough, I found someone like Ian, and man, he's been amazing. And then Cody, I think you almost deserve uh you could have a whole podcast talking about the accomplishments that you have. So Cody runs the ultimate first person shooter framework. Am I saying that correctly?
Close enough.
Well, maybe we get it right. How about you take over?
Ultimate multiplayer FPS framework.
Not quite close. Okay.
And what is that?
It's basically, so this is specific to Unreal,
Mhm.
but if you're familiar with their marketplace, they have assets that other developers can purchase to kind of help build out their project with. And they had a lot of stuff on there already in regards to shooters, but I never really liked the routes that they take because a lot of those products they're very closed off. So you're kind of you have to do it our way or you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
So I wanted
They're
to
very
build
limited.
all right. So I wanted to build something not like that. Hence the name framework. It's something you can kind of at least the groundwork for you to build on.
Yeah.
So because I know I wanted to build a game in the future. I love shooters, so it's going to be a shooter. So I wanted to build a nice framework that I could have, has everything laid out that I can just more quickly iterate what I want in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So another way is one, I could sell that. People would actually, benefit from it. So that helps fund the project. That helps me get other developer feedback that are using it in real projects so I can improve upon it there based upon,
Mm-hmm.
what they like, what they don't like, what is hard to work with, that kind of thing. And it just, in the process of about I think we're actually a little over the 2-year mark that it's
2 year
been up.
Yeah.
And it's been 2 years of full-time development for just basically a shooter framework.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and I that's obviously where I met Cody. Like many other people, I found what he had made, and I was enamored by it. Right, it's aesthetically very pleasing, and it's very thorough, and it definitely brings pretty in-depth development tools to someone who may not necessarily be that skilled, and I think
Yeah.
that's super cool. And in many ways, you go look at a AAA project, what they've done is created those frameworks that allow them to kind of grow to scale based on the intention of the project long term. And
Yeah.
and so working with Cody, we've sort of worked on making a custom version of what he's provided to everybody, and it's super cool. It's in many ways, I'm very thankful for that kind of opportunity. And in many other ways, we're lucky that we have folks like, say, Ian. Ian, you're pretty engrossed in the industry, and you have sort of your own story to tell and your own experiences.
Yeah, like it's been said multiple times, I'm in a long chain connected to Microsoft and 343 as a contractor. I've been working with them for the past 3 years, and unfortunately, I'm under a pretty heavy NDA that they're very interested in finding people who break it. With the recent leak of their switch from their in-house engine over to the Unreal Engine for the Halo Infinite series, so that's already leaked. Can't get in trouble for it. But I can't really get into anything more than that. But I've been with Microsoft and 343, working on their engine, their in-house proprietary engine for about the entire time. And yeah, it was about the beginning of the year, December of last year, that I saw my wife earlier walk by. We needed some extra money, so I started reaching out to a bunch of different locations, putting my resume out there, trying to find another job to get into a more development focused position and hopefully career path.
Yeah.
And that's when Drew reached out to me and brought me on board.
Very cool. And now, if as we come up to the Steam's Next Fest, how did you guys get? Was the plan to have a trailer ready for then, or sort of things all came together at the right time, and you submitted it, or whatever that process was?
Right. So what's always been very important to me is that we wanted to follow what I would consider sort of industry standard practice. And, whatever that really means, right? Everyone has their own way of handling things. But I think what mattered to me is that I wanted to put it out there. I wanted people to see this concept and see this idea. And I've known from the get-go that I would want to have a very open and transparent process, development process. And so, putting a Steam page out there, right? Having a trailer. Obviously, these are things I made myself, and once again, you can probably tell by the quality. It's not the best stuff out there, but it is what we have sort of representing us at the moment, and it is fun to see so many people interact with it, whether it be positive or negative, of course. But at some point after having published and made our Steam page and being public facing, Steam reached out to us as they do to most upcoming games, and they just said, hey, would you like to participate in Steam Next Fest? You can sign up here. And so we did, and that sort of began a half year grind of just trying to get our proof of concept out there. And so kind of like what Cody touched on earlier is, the Unreal Engine is provided for free to pretty much everyone, but what there is a market that has a ton of assets, like Cody's asset, for example. And so what we wanted to do was kind of slap some things together and get our idea out there, just enough to where we can see in a visual representation of sorts what we're looking to build, and basically that laid the groundwork for us to actually begin our development, which we've been doing since Steam Next Fest and arguably a little bit before that. And so, when you're dealing with something that is sort of just slapped together, it's not the most performant, it is not the highest quality. And so we've now been trying to bring together a team of people to make that are priorities. So, for example, we brought on Lucas, a technical artist. He's been helping make our map and our performance, the map's performance specifically, incredibly optimized. And in some cases, we had a lot of complaints about the settings available during Steam Next Fest. So we've been extending out a tremendous amount of settings, right? And global illumination, hardware ray tracing, ray trace shadows, DLSS,
Yeah.
FSR for AMD, stuff like that. And so, once again, following that industry standard, what we're doing is looking at all of our would-be competitors, and we're trying to see how we can emulate what they do well,
Yeah.
and obviously steer clear of what they do wrong.
Right. Very cool. And now I missed this part, but why don't you describe what the whole concept of We the People is?
Sure. So, we obviously love EFT. We love the idea that they've put forth. We love games like DayZ and Hunt Showdown and the Cycle. We love the extraction shooter genre, and we're trying to make sort of our love letter to that. Obviously, there's quite a few of us on the team that are veterans, and so what we want to do is bring that sort of gritty realism that we know all too well to the gaming, and Tarkov does a great job at that. There's a couple things that they missed the mark on, and so we would like to see our own take on that, and that's really what We the People is. It's a tremendous amount of weapon and firearm customization, incredibly important, right? Utilizing an immense amount of real world brands and providing that to players so they get that ultimate player agency. Super, super important to what we're trying to achieve. But beyond that, we are trying to look at the technical aspects of games like EFT, games like Hunt, and the Cycle, which obviously won't exist much longer. But there's a lot of ways we look at what they do, and we want to improve upon that blueprint. And so to do that, we have to find what basically the overall player sentiments are, where there's a lot of complaints, and we want to basically hear those out and try to implement that into what we're doing. And so through partnering with just a tremendous amount of content creators, we've basically heard out a lot of the complaints, a lot of the perspectives and sentiments of people, as well as obviously the broader community for all of our favorite games, all the games that we sort of look up to and aspire to sort of emulate. And now we're just trying to create a game that sort of represents that. So what is We the People? We the People is an extraction shooter. It's probably a little bit larger in scale compared to, say, Tarkov. You're not limited to, say, a 45-minute lobby, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead, you're going to be following a somewhat the Cycle-esque 12-hour lobby, and you're going to have a constant influx of players and just players coming in and out and new refresh loot and stuff like that. There's going to be sort of imminent danger at all times, and we think that's super cool. We definitely dislike the concept of, say, EFT or Hunt, where once you've cleared that board, what are you worried about?
Right.
What you're worried about? What, maybe like a couple remaining scabs?
Yeah.
Tall
Once
to the
you've been
face.
playing, right. Once you've been playing long enough, that's not really a concern to anybody. And so we kind of like this idea that at all times there is that danger. And so that's sort of our approach. And that's maybe a microcosm of our broader goal, but it's to look at all aspects of the games we love and aspire to be in some cases, and improve upon what they've done.
Yeah. See, I really like the concept of, when I jumped over to DayZ, is like it's missing that gunplay that we have from Tarkov, and mixing that in. And from your trailer showing the decaying bodies, I love that. You got vaulting, we have snow, and you have footprints in the snow. It's like this is all really cool stuff.
Yeah, they teach you, and Ian, obviously you can attest to this from your time in the Army, but what they teach you in the military is this concept of noise and light discipline. It's this idea that everything you do leaves a footprint, so to speak. And so what you want to do is be very mindful and considerate about what you're doing. Obviously, the light you're giving off and emitting, the noise you're creating. And so in some ways, we want to kind of make this game a very survival-esque, where you could be hunted or hunt other players, you could be tracked or track other players, and that's super important. So something as simple as, say, footsteps in the snow, that can go a long way, especially from a very organic PvP mindset.
Yeah. Or the I love the concept of a body could be decaying, fresh blood, or all dried up. So there's action has happened, but it's no longer here. Things like that. I think that's a really cool thing to more immerse yourself into that game.
Yeah, and once again, we've partnered with folks like, say, Evasion GG, right? We love the idea of competitive play, and folks like Utopia Gaming. They all have given their perspectives on what really provides that competitive play. And one thing we like to think of, a skilled We the People player will be able to stumble upon a points of interest and see potentially player or AI bodies littered about, and depending on the state of that AI or player's decay, you can sort of figure out how long ago it was killed, like you sort of mentioned. And so that actually provides another level of play and some depth for a player who wants to kind of get more acclimated and skilled at the game, right? We definitely don't want to make a game that is too hard for people to get into. It's a hardcore game inherently, so it will be tough, right? It will be unforgiving naturally. But I think what comes with the hardcore nature of the game isn't sort of navigating through our UIs or anything like that. That should be simple. That should be super easy. And that's what we want to say goodbye to with, say, the EFTs and the Daisies and all these games that sort of take place in that Soviet-esque, locations. And maybe it's something inherent to being American, convenience, right?
Right.
But we want the hardcore nature to be about the game and the gameplay and the gunplay. And the survivability, as opposed to just navigating through things. And so small little visual cues like, say, a decaying body, I think will once again provide that extra depth for competitive play.
Yeah, and I think you want immersion, but you don't want to be over the top realism that it just it takes away from the experience of being immersed into this game, in this world.
Yeah, I mean, Barry, may I ask you, do you prefer reloading each round at a time? Does that actually provide a more meaningful gameplay for you?
It doesn't, but you do have to, for when you're engaged in a fight. If I'm cheap, I'm bringing in 2 mags and 60 spare rounds. Now I'm going to pay for my frugalness, and now I got to manually load that versus our COD like just flip. So there is some aspect of that if you're going to be well equipped going into a raid or whatever you're going to call it, it's you should pay that price if you don't prepare properly.
What an insightful response too, because what you're doing is sort of capturing the challenge of games like EFT, right? You sort of have to find that balance and then reconcile that balance. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is look at the things that end up providing a more meaningful play to people, and finding where we can still toe that line to realism and immersion, but not necessarily tedium, right? Finding ways, once again, say the queue system, right? Everyone loves when there's a brand new map, for example, on EFT, but you know what people don't love?
Waiting.
A 30-minute queue, right? Especially if you're trying to scav in or whatever. And so I think what we can do is leverage modern tech and modern server systems and find a way to get that sort of seamless transition. And by having these longer matches that don't last 45 minutes, less than an hour in most cases, but instead 12 hours, right? There's a constant inflow and outflow of players. That's going to mean the average player loading screen is non-existent practically, right? It's seamless. You're just hopping in. The moment you want to play the game, you're playing the game. And that's why we sort of lean so heavily on the concept of there being no main menu simulator. We want players to be in the game at all times, right? You're not getting cold. And that's sort of indicative of a competitive game, is to remain warm and remain immersed in the world that we've painstakingly started to create.
Yeah. There's 2 points there you really bring up. The fact that, when you go into a raid that everybody's starting at the same time, now everybody's rushing for those, those POIs versus something that has a longer cycle. It may not be a very active POI, so you may be able to sneak in and get out and whatnot. So that's, I think that's a very good way, to approach it. But jumping back to you're talking about, how do you want to load the bullets? Like if I reference DayZ, where you've got to take the box, you've got to go into your menu, you've got to, open the box to get to the bullets, and then that's painful. That's breaking immersion.
And to me, that like that would be something someone would say or label as hardcore, but arguably it takes you completely out of it, and it's no longer hardcore. It's like you say, it's painful, and
Yeah.
you know, it's the idea of opening up a menu, going from your inventory to your hand, physically holding it, doing the action, taking it out of your hand, putting the next object in your hand. It's just,
Yeah.
it's too much, you
Yeah.
know, and so call it the typical American thing,
Yeah.
but we're after convenience, and we're not going to sacrifice the immersion or the
Yeah.
realism, but we will certainly find a way to make things like, say, changing an optic on the fly simple.
Yep, absolutely. I like that. So now jumping into sort of the technical aspect of the game. So you're developing an Unreal Engine, and this is where my lack of knowledge is going to come through. So hopefully, Cody and Ian, you're going to be able to, like, you know, answer all these questions and you know, provide some great insight here. But the benefit, I have to think, like you were talking about the framework you're developing, and with Unreal Engine, I have to think there's, like, you know, sort of modules you can sort of, you know, like you were saying earlier, slap together that you could take in and then sort of massage them how you want them to be, so the development cycle isn't as long, where you compare to something like EFT, which has been based off of on spaghetti code, you know, bolting this on into this, and now if you want to change, you've got to go back 3 layers to change something. Your approach, it sounds like, you know, with a framework, you've got something you're building off and you can go back and change or make adjustments to fairly easily.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the, for example, like this will be useful for this project. One of the big updates that I had beforehand was separating everything out into modules. So Unreal has their own kind of concept of modules, but think of it like separate containers for your logic. So what your program does. So we might have a module that's dedicated to, for example, the inventory. That's in its own thing. Nothing's relying on it. We want to modify the inventory. We modify that module. We don't have to worry about really much else breaking in the process.
Yeah.
Whereas if that was intertwined with a bunch of other stuff, you know, then you could lead to a bunch of unexpected problems. You just don't know what's going to be the failure point
Right.
there. So that's kind of the approach we're taking, where everything is kind of segregated into its own unique container, so to speak, where it doesn't have a bunch of reliance on a bunch of other systems. But then by the time we get to our actual core project, that main module, that is what is going to reference all those small modules, those small little gameplay features that we made, and really be able to make use of them. So a lot of stuff that we build is going to be built kind of in that framework mindset, so to speak.
And Cody, to his point, you know, he sort of mentioned the idea of slap together spaghetti code, right? That's, I mean, that's sort of what you saw during the demo, and maybe what you see in some of these games that have been out for 6 or 7 years, and they're starting to look at an entire rework here and there as necessary. And so, luckily, once again, we with that foresight, we get to look at what they're doing and basically say, how can we prevent that moving forward?
Yeah.
And so,
Because
something
I will
as
say,
simple. Yeah, go ahead.
doing a refactor is oftentimes a lot harder than just deleting it and starting over
Yeah.
for a lot of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, and in some cases, you look at, say, this spatial inventory system that Cody's been working on. This is the thing that sort of almost everything relies on. But in a way, we also want to be able to iterate and improve upon that moving forward as well, right? If we want to expand upon it or make changes to it, we don't want that to break a handful of other things. And so, in some ways, what we're doing now with this refactor is saving headaches down the line, and potentially, once again, a rework 7 years later.
Yeah.
Right. We don't want that. We want to build it with good functionality and almost like good feng shui now. Right?
Yeah.
That's super important. So
And now you know, again, you're going to correct me if I'm wrong in this one here, but when it comes to, like, you know, ballistics or even sort of the guns, do you guys have to model all the guns from scratch, or there's assets you can get and then, okay, I want now I want the ballistics to be X, Y, and Z. I need to change it. That's not rewriting everything, you know, sort of, you know, rendering and, you know, capturing the audio. Is that all the things you have to do, or there's pieces that you guys can sort of, you know, bring into the game?
in most cases, we wouldn't want to use assets that everyone has. You
Yeah.
know, we obviously did that for the demo, but beyond that, we definitely want to have something that is sort of unique to We the People, and that's why we're very thankful to have partnered with a ton of firearm manufacturers, optics, accessory
Nice.
brands, stuff like that. And so we definitely have access to a ton of that information. So, for example, if we wanted to partner with a particular brand, they would give us the very accurate dimensions, and we could then toss that to a 3D artist. They could
Nice.
generate that content, that asset, and we could put it into our game. And so we're sort of establishing those workflows now. And in some cases, we do have assets that represent certain firearms and things like that. And that's a great starting point, right?
Yeah.
But moving forward, especially if, say, we establish ourselves with a publisher someday, having that tremendous amount of funding is what's going to allow us to build a game we want to make, right? With that quality in mind. And so, using assets provided to everybody, that means you're sort of, let's say an asset isn't necessarily game ready, or it's not made with optimization in mind.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways what we can do, a lot of things that we can do to sort of move forward with optimization in mind. Brand specifically is working on a master material that can be applied to practically every mesh that we have in our game: weapons, optics, any accessory, things like that. And so by employing tactics like that, what we're doing is basically allowing ourselves to grow to scale in a major way. And all of that is in tandem with Cody's system, his framework that he created, where iterating and adding, say, a new optic is something that can be done in a matter of minutes.
Nice.
We saw, obviously, not to pick on AFT here, but it took, say, 6 years to add 30 weapons or whatever it was, right? This is something we could do in 6 months or less. If we had a very large team of people dedicated to this task specifically, it could be done in days or a matter of weeks. And so it's really astounding. And obviously you touched on ballistics. That's a very intricate process, and we're thankful to have a math wizard like Eric working on that. He's done just the best job possible trying to create almost unnecessary realism to it without creating any sort of performance drawbacks or bloats or anything like that. And so through his efforts, we're going to be having one of the most realistic ballistic systems in any game. What you're going to see is that depending on the type of weather, right, the air density, right, of the velocity of a round might be different based off of whether it's raining or it's sunny or it's snowing, for example.
Very cool. And now, going to that elephant in the room, EFT, something that they've been knocked on was, that's really hurt them is the net code, the audio, and the anti-cheat. So let's see how, let's get your take on, in your opinion, how can you provide any details on how you're approaching the audio aspect? Are you going to leverage, Unreal's audio? What's your plan there?
So we've actually been sort of discussing internally whether or not we wanted to use Steam Audio or something like UE's Meta Sounds, which is sort of the newest tech provided to UE. And in some cases, new tech isn't always the best tech, but with UE, they've done an amazing job at providing new tech, and it's almost always out of the box, just an improvement flat out upon whatever was there prior. And so we're definitely looking at leveraging that. We look at games like, say, 6 Days in Fallujah. They're doing a fantastic job at sound design, right? And a lot for us to learn from, right? We definitely can acknowledge in some cases our sound was pretty cool during the demo for where we were. But in other cases, we had people criticizing, say, that Hollywood suppressor, that little noise. And so things like that, we're definitely going to try to work with some of these brands that we're partnered with and provide an accurate, true to life experience for players, especially in terms of the audio.
Yeah. Nice.
Netcode though.
Yeah.
I sorry to cut you off. Netcode though, I know Ian, you've been making our movement component a very large priority of yours. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that and why it's important to have a good and more importantly, new movement component that is separate, say, from UE's basic default movement component.
I could talk about the movement component, but the netcode is probably better for Cody. But we are having a fully replicated movement system that is taking care of both the player's movement for the client side on their PC. That's also being tracked on the server, so that there's very little visual delay or lag, and whether the player is crouching or proning or running around really fast or spazzing out. It's still going to be very accurate as to placement and positioning for shots or explosions.
Yeah, you'll find latency. People say, from a different region, you might not find that it performs all too different than if you were playing with other people from your region.
Yeah. Nice. And now, and from the sort of how you guys are going to approach the sort of an anti-cheat standpoint? Because that's truly the hardest thing to swallow with EFT is,
Right.
that's hurt them so many times, whether it's the RMT piece of it or just,
Right.
that because it's an extraction shooter, your gear is important to you, and to lose that
It's the
questionable
most
deaths,
important part. Yeah.
yeah,
So, this is probably our most asked question, probably the most opinionated feedback we've received so far. So, I am genuinely excited to talk about this. In terms of anti-cheat, it's so important not to just utilize whatever has been sort of dissected already. Granted, we'll always have a contingency plan, right? If say all things fail, we could settle with say the easy anti-cheat, and not to disparage them, they have a great system, but I'm pretty sure, and if either of you know the true accurate number, I'm pretty sure it's like a 37% or something like that success rate. That's rough, and
That is.
to those of us who are long-term and long time EFT fans, I've been playing since the first public alpha. I love the game, but I've quit wipes because I saw someone say live streaming on Twitch on labs of them hacking for days on end with
Mm-hmm.
no sort of interference by obviously BSG or
Right.
even Twitch, and that's just so discouraging. It sucks. It sucks to see,
Yep.
and it hurts as a fan of the game. We love the game, but we hate to see it. And so, not to mention those types of folks are distributing their hacks,
Right.
their discords, whatever, and it's like it feels like a losing battle, right?
It
And that
does.
sucks. And so, looking at leveraging new tech is incredibly important. So there is stuff out there, and obviously it's getting a lot of attention, but things that have not yet been deciphered or dissected by people who wish to fuck up games. That's
Yeah.
the only way to say it, right? They
You're right.
look to mess up the process, and they look to mess up the competitive spirit of games. And so something like say Any Brain, which is a brand new AI anti-cheat, it is 99% effective, and what it does is it actually measures a player's actions. In game versus their actions out of game. So, for example, their peripheral devices like a mouse, like a keyboard. When you're hacking, you might automatically turn and engage with an enemy, right?
Yep.
But if you didn't move your mouse or move your keyboard to actually do that action, those are the type of things that would flag in Any Brain system and basically alert us as a team what's happening and what's going on. And so really those systems, especially utilizing AI. Now, we're all tired of AI. We're all tired of hearing about it. I know I am. I much prefer the amazing concept art by say Jess or Greg or any of our lovely folks compared to say Midjourney. But
Yep.
when it comes to something like the software end of things and that type of just unmatched visual representation of what's happening. When you have AI that is constantly looking for these things, I might have to go take a coffee break or something like that.
Right.
Whereas AI will just forever be watching. And
Mm-hmm.
as scary as that is, it's not the Terminator, but look, if we the people to be a competitive game, we have to employ some tactics that are challenging, and we want to challenge people who want to do bad, who want to ruin the spirit of competitive play in our game. And so things like that are definitely efforts we're going to be employing to try to provide that better, more meaningful experience to players. And then obviously you described RMT. That is such a challenge. Obviously being a long-term fan of Blizzard, we get to see where in some cases they've legalized RMT in their games through their WoW token, if we're talking about World of Warcraft, right? Is that the solution? I don't think so. And so in some cases, what we're going to be trying to do is basically use these real-time analytics that are provided to us through our server subsystems, and basically try to implement as much effort as we can, as a small team can, to being mindful of these things, and try to prevent as much wrongdoing as we can.
Yeah.
Right? That's important. And it's not a solid answer, but it is a promise that we'll make an effort.
Nice. And now, you were talking about AI. We're cringing on AI. I have to talk about
Right.
the AI because you have to build AI into the zombies. I guess the benefit of
Sure.
having AI into zombies, they don't have to be too smart. They can just sort of, you don't have to, they're not the sort of AI we're going to see in 6 Days to Fallujah with the intelligence they have there.
You'd be surprised. You'd
Okay.
be surprised. Yeah. The demo didn't necessarily showcase too many brains. Obviously, they were more interested in eating the player's brain than
Yeah.
than showcasing theirs. But I like to see AI in game as enemies, as the good AI. That's the type of AI, the term we like. We don't
Mhm.
cringe at that one. That's kind of meaningful, right? And
Yes.
making sure that the behavior trees employed by those AI are sort of robust, and there's a lot of potential action. So obviously, you brought up zombies. Zombies are very important in a zombie apocalypse type shooter, right?
Yep.
Of course, but even beyond zombies, what we're gonna have are pretty gangster AI that want to engage with players, that want to basically come and kick your ass,
Yeah.
right? That's the intention, right? Obviously, we've all seen EFT's AI and scabs for a while, and they've done a great job at changing the scavs over time, and especially with like specialty bosses and raiders and things like that. And there's a lot to praise them on,
Oh,
especially over that
absolutely.
journey, right?
Yep.
Especially coming from our perspective, who says, hey, we'd love to showcase an iterative process. Well, kudos to them for those changes too. And in some cases, we get to learn from that. We get to learn from AI from a lot of games,
Yeah.
like say 6 Days in Fallujah. And what we want is AI that would almost have their own motives and
Mhm.
intentions, right? In a post-apocalyptic world where everybody's trying to survive, is someone just going to stand in the center of the road, kind of panning around until they see you and go "Gapka," and then
Right.
shoot at you? Probably not, right? Instead, they might see you and engage with you. They might try to fuck you up, and that's important.
Yeah. So we're gonna have other AI other than zombies. Then we're gonna have like sort of
Oh,
a.
absolutely.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool. I wasn't sure. That's why I was like,
Yeah.
you're from an AI standpoint, you don't need to worry about zombies, but that's really cool that you're gonna have like some sort of a faction or other rogue elements that
Oh,
you.
there will definitely be a few types of AI. That's super important to us.
Excellent.
I think that's something maybe I could have improved upon in the first devlog
Yeah.
is really touching on the fact that we're going to have a lot more than just zombies. There's so many people, especially in the comments, that say, you had me up until you talked about the zombies. They're so boring. They're uninspired and otherwise. But I'm with you. I actually agree. And I think,
That's cool.
once again, maintaining that noise and light discipline, it's so
Yeah.
important that being mindful of the type of engagements you find yourself, even against AI, well, you could get third partied if you're not careful. And
Yeah.
so I think zombies will definitely provide a meaningful experience for players in ways they're not even expecting it. However, for the real challenge, I think that's where you're going to find like our versions of scavs, our versions of raiders, our versions of, you know, bosses or otherwise.
Right.
And when we say bosses, we're not talking about like the division, like bullet sponges. We don't
Yes.
want that. That's another thing that's super important to me. And I'd say all of us as well is, we don't want there to be such a large disparity between, say, a high level and a low level player. And that's why, once again, having AI that might get you into some trouble, making noise and having to pop off, well, you're going to have to be very mindful, especially if there's, a high level player or a low level player.
Yeah.
Anyone can engage you and kill you. And, obviously you can make friends through proximity chat and things like that and meet the
Yeah.
people, but you have to be very mindful about what you're doing, and you have to watch your step.
And now you touched on a low level player and a high level player. So is there going to be a progression system for the character that you're
Absolutely.
running with? And then to add on to that, will there be like seasons or wipes? What's your envision of sort of the keep people playing the game?
This is my favorite thing to talk about, so I'm going to try to make it as short and sweet as I can, because I can be quite verbose, I know. But What I'll say is this. Yeah, Ian, thank you. I agree, man. I agree. So in general, there will absolutely be a progression system for players. There's no doubt in our minds that we want to have something that is meaningful, but not necessarily something that, once again, creates that large disparity between other players. So finding ways to make survival and surviving the elements, surviving your bodily needs and necessities, that's going to be important through the progression system, but you never really want to make a player like a super soldier compared to everyone else, right? I feel like that's where some games miss the mark. And so, that's really important. We're also going to have a progression system for our hideout, which is, I know you're thinking like hideout, EFT, it's going to be very different. It's basically much like, say, Halo Forge, for example. You're going to be able to, in real time, place objects where you want them, build it to look how you want to, and there's going to be a whole progression system based around that concept. But those types of things might also help you. For example, let's say you're in the safe zone settlement. Well, if your hideout's leveled up, maybe you'll be regenerating water, food, things like that a little quicker. That's to be expected.
Yeah.
Now, talking about a wipe system, that's super important. And like I mentioned, probably my favorite thing to discuss, because for us, we've come to love and also hate EFT's progression system, because it's really just a game based around leveling. There's no real end game at the moment, right? Once you get, say, Kappa, is that the end of your journey? Do you go and jump on Minecraft or whatever? Well, if you watch Twitch, that seems to be the case. And so for us, what we want to do is, once again, look at all these things, attempt to balance them. And so creating a meaningful end game system is incredibly important to us. But I'd say just as important to that is making wipe worthwhile, but making it memorable. So obviously we've talked a little bit in our devlog about how we're going to have an arena system. Something that is really important to me is bringing back almost like this old school feel. Let's say if you're a fan of like old school RuneScape or something like that. Back in the day, if you were there for a certain event, you would participate and get a particular item. And when you were walking around the world, people would see you wearing that cosmetic item, and you were basically Billy Badass. People got to see that you were there at that time, at that place, during that event, and you earned it. That's super cool. That's super important. And so not only providing ideas and concepts for cosmetics like that during just everyday average extraction gameplay, but also a progression system for our arena system, right? Allowing players who went and earned, say, the top 100, the top 10, the top 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. There might be a specific cosmetic for you that you've went and earned and that was arguably pretty hard fought. And now you get the bragging rights. You get the ultimate show off what I've done. And you get maybe even a plaque to throw in your hideout and say, hey, your boy was top 100 in this wipe. Something that actually provides that sort of memorable system, or that sort of memento for players, moving forward. And so just as important as, say, our story and providing sort of that live DLC, so to speak, something to that effect, also providing cosmetics that people can look at and go, yeah, he was there, he participated in that. I think that's the type of thing that really gets people get jazzed about, and hopefully we do it right. I don't want the shop items to be the only way people can look cool.
Right.
Hell, if we don't need a shop, I'd prefer not to even have one. But what I definitely want is there to be meaningful progression and some sort of ranked arena system. I think is a good way to deliver at least the more desirable cosmetics.
Yeah. And now, will the arena system be a part of the main game, or is that going to be like a DLC or something else? Okay.
Absolutely. We're not trying to sell two different versions of We the People here. You're not going to be able to buy just the We the People base game and then the arena, nothing like that. You just, our game, we're looking at launching it for $19.99 on Steam. Obviously we'll have bundle tiers and stuff like that. But you'll never be paying more than, say, like $50 if you truly wanted to ball out on We the People. And in some cases, I think I think it's really important that we as a small team are representing to people good integrity, right? We're not trying to siphon your lifeblood. We're not just trying to create a shop and a microtransaction simulator and then, wrap a game around it. The game comes first. The game's what matters. And if we try to find a way to balance having, say, single player and multiplayer and all the type of game modes that people prefer, we'll certainly do that.
Yeah.
Now, the real challenge here is how do we not extend the scope beyond our initial intended goals?
Right.
Well, we're keeping that in mind.
Yeah.
We're trying to be incredibly mindful about these and realize we are a small team. And so finding a balance in all these things is just as important as the rest.
All right. And now we talked about the extraction aspect of it. So how is the extraction mechanic going to work, or how would you describe I'm coming in, I'm going to do a raid, start and end. What does that progress look like, or what is that process?
Well, I imagine if I was, say, in a party with all you three, at the main menu at the settlement, right? We'd be sitting at our stash, we'd be gearing out, we'd be customizing the aspects of our firearm that you cannot customize in raid at a workbench or otherwise,
Yeah.
right? And let's say I'm stocking up on ammo, stocking up on supplies, food, meds, stuff like that, right? When we're ready to deploy, it's as simple as just walking over, deploying. Maybe there's a small transition cutscene, but you're in,
Yeah.
right? It's incredibly seamless. Now that's our intended goal, right? We're looking at games like The Cycle, who have done that well, and almost what I would consider to be the gold standard for extraction shooters today. And so, following that kind of blueprint, that's what we intend to provide to people. And once you're in the game, now you're stuck in, aren't you? Now you really have to battle everybody. Now you have to survive. And that's the challenge, right? There's going to be a ton of obviously points of interest depending on the map. And they are incredibly large maps. And trying to find out what your priority is, whether you went in with a particular quest or goal in mind. Let's say your intention is to just get into the most organic PvP you can. Well, luckily, at that point, you're just in there surviving as long as you can until you get God or you get gear enough that's good enough that you want to hightail it out of there, right? You want to beat feet to a extraction point, which of course there will be many of, and a lot of them will be a little more accessible, but equally as dangerous. Some of which will be less accessible, like they might be locked behind a key for perhaps, and maybe you're afforded a little bit more protection when going to that type of location. And then there might even be some out of the way extractions, but they pose their own challenge, right?
Yeah.
It might be in the heart of an outpost full of AI that once again want to kick your ass.
Yeah.
And that's sort of your goal, is to get in, loot up, and get out.
It's almost you can approach it if you want to play it like a DayZ type. Hey, I just want to go in, survive in the outback, and as long as I can do that. Or sort of what we're familiar with from a Tarkov type. Hey, I got some goals, a quest I want to bang out. Let's focus on that, and get back to our settlement when we're done that achievement.
Yeah, and I would say, leaning closer to the Tarkov concept of people are going to want to progress. You're going to want to improve your character. There's going to be plenty of positive reasons to do that. Not just obviously, more things available to you through traders, but if you do want to go in PvP, you can do that too. And if you don't care at all about quests, let's just say all you want to do is just get into that fight, you can do that. Obviously, we're going to have the arena system for that. I don't know any other way to say it, but skipping the foreplay, right? You just get right into it. And, something we're kind of looking at, once again, I referenced old school RuneScape. It's this idea that, let's say Ian he just doesn't stop talking shit. Well, I'm going to challenge him to a 1v1. I'm going to say, play me for pink slips. You wager your kid, I'll wager mine.
Yeah.
Let's duke it out. Let's see who's the better man. It's like the old days on COD, 1v1 me on Rust, there's something awesome about that. And I like the idea of bringing that back. But once again, let's say you have a team of, you have a best friend that you guys you click. You know each other's tactics. You know you're both pretty decent players. You can hop into a duo in the arena system. You can hop into a trio, right? Squads will max out at 5, right, for the extraction as well as the arena mode. You know, um, we won't promise that there will never be, say, a larger scale game mode or something like that, like a TDM. But once again, within the scope of our original intended development, these are things we can consider when the game is out. And we found some successes.
Yeah, something that's I think really cool, and you mentioned earlier working with people like the Evasion,
Right.
taking their feedback and what they would like to see from an arena mode. I think that's that's really positive way of thinking.
Man, I would love to see Sigma on this podcast someday. If you've ever considered it, she's astounding, and,
She's
and
been on a
Hotel's
couple
quite great too.
times.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, silly me. There you go. Egg on my face, but she's awesome.
Yes.
And the community they have built is astounding. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so cool to see. And the Evasion flag flies everywhere. You would never expect it. I hop into a random streamer's page, and sure enough, I see the little tag
Yeah.
there, and I'm like, wow, I didn't expect that. I thought I knew everyone who was associated, and
Yeah.
it just never stops. And they're great people. And one thing they do have is that tremendous insight into what helps and makes a great,
Exactly.
competitive play, but not just from the perspective of someone playing the game, but a viewer, right?
Mhm.
And that's kind of what allows them as a production team to basically create the best competitive perspective to a viewer possible. And
Yeah.
so what we want to do moving forward, especially as our game gets a little further down the line in development, is we want to work with them to create sort of like a comparable CSGO style shoutcasting perspective for viewers as well. So that way tournaments can be incredibly meaningful to viewers.
Yep, absolutely. And then adding on to that, you've taken a unique approach, like sort of like opening the Komodo and saying, hey, here we are, working with the content creators, getting them in early,
Right.
and getting their feedback, engaging them. I think that's a really cool way of sort of getting everybody excited for it.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. Like that's one of the largest amounts of groundwork that we've done thus far. One of the most amounts of groundwork, I guess I should say, is getting involved with a lot of these content creators, and so getting them kind of in meetings with our writing team to create a meaningful character. Right, we're not just trying to get content creators to go play our closed play tests and stuff like that. Right, the hype, the generation, that's important, right, for especially like a grassroots marketing strategy.
Mhm.
We're on top of that. We understand that. That's sort of easy, right? That's to be expected. But what we want to do is actually genuinely involve creators, even folks like yourself, for example. Right? If you were interested in playing a character, for example, what we would do is have you meet up with our writing team. We would find out what your intentions are, your motivations, whether you want to be might be sort of pseudo RPG or D&D, but do you want to be lawfully good? Do you want to be chaotically neutral, right? Anything kind of in between good and evil. And what we'll do is try to write something out and take your feedback, right? And get your perspective on whether or not the character we've written actually matches the intentions you want your character to display. And once again, whether you even want that character to represent, say, your online personality or something entirely for the sake of our project. And so we've partnered with just the coolest people ever, and we're very thankful that people are taking a chance on us and giving us the time of their day. That's super cool of them. And realistically, what we want to do is make the game as friendly for everybody's community as possible, right? And obviously, once again, from a grassroots marketing strategy, there's no doubt that it's going to be a fairly successful endeavor to have all the parasocial Andes out there able to engage with their favorite content creator, right? I imagine that would energize some people too.
And then the other piece that the content creators bring to the table is their thousands of hours of playing these games. They can the feedback. You know what? right peak leaning, the things like all that
Right. The
information that
inertia system. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So you have, you're going to get all sorts of data coming back into you, and then something that at the beginning of some games, development of some games, people don't have that access to the content or the creators.
All right, looks like we'll might have lost Ian. Yeah, no, that's incredibly it's incredibly accurate, right? Like that's probably been the thing that's generated the most hype from the perspective of these creators is that they get the opportunity to be a part of something from the ground up and
Exactly.
give those perspectives, especially when, potentially like the alternative might feel like it's closed off, like it's not listening, like it doesn't care about the player's sentiments. Whereas, you know, look at the name, look at small indie company,
Yep.
we're almost openly mocking the concept of these out of touch companies. Look at We the People. It's in the name. It's a game of the people, by the people, for the people.
Yep.
That's our goal. That's our ethos. That's our intentions and our mission statement. So if we're not doing that, we're expecting you to call us out. We're expecting you to basically hold us to that standard that we want to hold each other to. And in some cases, it starts with the content creators, but it does trickle down to the broader community as a whole. And we want to make sure our game is as accessible to everyone as possible.
Yep. Awesome. I love the story, and I got to thank you guys for your time. What do you guys have for upcoming milestones that people should sort of keep an eye out for?
Yeah. So obviously working on devlogs, incredibly important. We want to keep that content coming out. We want to keep that transparency going. We just released devlog number 2, and we're very thankful for that. It was the first time we were not just public facing, but sitting down as a team, recording live and just kind of chatting. And boy, can you tell it's live. We are really just kind of chatting among us as a team. And you hear quite a lot of ums and this and that. And we are not that media trained. But
Yep.
in terms of big milestones, we're really looking at late August for potentially like another demo. We would be kind of pushing it close, but we're gonna try. We're gonna do what we can to achieve that goal, and then obviously we're gonna be showcasing at Math Chief's Expo, right? His games expo, and obviously last year I think that got 1.5
Oh,
million
wow.
views across the board, and I think the year before that it was like 1 million. So to have an opportunity like that, especially this early, we're very thankful for that, and we're gonna just continue to try to approach these small, meaningful milestones and try to just continue showing off our progress. And I guess from Cody's perspective, finishing up our spatial inventory, right? That's super important because that is the basis for our game, other than say the gunplay in the framework broadly. And so from
That
from
crap's
Ian,
surprisingly hard.
yeah, no kidding. And from Ian's perspective, making sure the movement is replicated and as performant as possible, providing players the opportunity to change keybinds and settings and options right through Lucas and his endeavors. Working with people like Sydney to provide very, very high quality and newly updated sounds. That's going to be very important. And just all of us as a team, right? We're trying to work together to create a game, and we're doing it all in front of you guys. So your judgments, your feedback, your praise, and even your criticisms, we're here for it.
And are we going to be able to switch shoulders when we're aiming, left or right?
You can actually already do that.
Nice. Excellent. And are we going to have a female character selection too?
Yes.
Excellent.
Obviously, the United States is a fairly culturally diverse place. It is a melting pot, and it takes place in the Pacific Northwest. A very, very diverse place.
Excellent.
And so not only are you going to be able to play a male or a female, you might find yourself able to play a lot more than pasty Russian 1 through 4.
There we go.
I'll just say it like that.
And a release date aiming for? I think I saw somewhere like 18 months out.
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair estimation. It would really depend on the type of publishing deal we might side with, or even if community funding sort of finds its way. But the truth is here, with or without supplemental funding, this game will get made, and that's our intention, that's our goal, and that's our promise. If we find ourselves with a publisher, we're going to do what makes the most sense for us as a team, but also what maintains the highest integrity of our project and our goals in mind. Like you mentioned, it's my baby, and I want to see it grow up and be everything it's intended to be. And so that's the goal. if it's 18 months from now and it's close but no cigar, what we'll do is follow Dark and Darker's blueprint and keep coming out with, weekly play tests and things
Yeah.
like that, letting people get their hands on it. But we're not intending on selling the game, at least in an early access state on Steam, until we feel it's ready. And,
Nice.
and once again, there's no gun to our head telling us we need to do it, we need to release it now, anything like that. So we will let it cook, we will let it bake, and hopefully it will turn into what it's intended to be long term.
Excellent. And now, how can people help or contribute?
Right. So I would say the best method right now, just give us a follow on our social medias. Right. We have a Twitter at Small Indico. We have a YouTube, We the People game. We have a Discord. Please join discord.gg/We the People. Obviously, we have a Patreon, but my advice to anybody, especially in somewhat tumultuous times, is be very mindful about your dollar. If you feel that you cannot contribute or you don't want to support this process, then don't. Just wait until the game comes out and then buy it then. But if you're absolutely interested, especially if you want to engage in some early multiplayer play tests, stress tests, bug bashes, anything like that, just giving us feedback, maybe some early access to demos, things like that, the Patreon's the best bet.
Excellent. All right, Ian, Drew, and Cody, thank you so much for your time, guys. I really appreciate it. It was nice meeting you, and I'm super pumped to see what you guys put out there.
It was an
Thank you.
absolute pleasure.
You as
Thank you
well.
for your time.
Thank you.